You're listening to the Archaeology Podcast Network.
This is the CRM Archaeology Podcast. It's the show where we pull back the veil of cultural resources management archaeology and discuss the issues that everyone is concerned about. Welcome to the podcast. Hello and welcome to the CRM Archaeology Podcast, episode 123 for November 8th, 2017. I'm your host, Chris Webster. On today's show, we talk about the new iPhone X and upgrading your tech for the field, the Me Too controversy on social media, and PhDs in the field. Should they be there? Should they go there? Should they check it out? We'll talk about all that. So let's learn to upgrade our conversations. You know what that means in about 40 minutes, because the CRM Archaeology Podcast starts right now. Okay, welcome to the show, everyone. Joining me today is Bill in California.
Good morning.
And that's it.
Yeah, well, you're lucky that I made it because today is daylight savings time.
Yes.
So, living in Arizona for 8 years, I just don't, my body doesn't even do anything. And all my phone and my computer, everything is all set to Arizona Standard Time.
Nice.
So none of my devices changed, right? So my alarm went off, and I woke up and just went about my business and everything. And then I started sending you messages, probably waking you up, like, hey, man, are we recording at 8 or whatever? But it was probably 7 o'clock where you're at. So I didn't know what time it even was.
I saw your Slack messages at like 5 o'clock in the morning. Yeah, I was like, oh shit, Bill's either just up early and not taking advantage of fall back on the hour or something. I just slept an extra hour because my shit changed automatically, and then my alarm went off, and I'm like, man, I feel totally refreshed. Why do I feel that way at 6 o'clock in the morning? Because it's actually 7.
Yeah, well, on the other hand, I was exhausted. Like, God, why does 7 feel so early? Like, where's the sun at? Why isn't the sun up yet? What's going on here? How come? What's going on here?
Nice.
So then, my wife, of course, told me, oh, it's fall back day. And I was like, what's fall back? I had to look, oh, wait a minute, daylight savings. What's that? Then I was complaining I woke up at 3:45 today because I could have slept in.
That's right.
Yeah, well,
this is like the only holiday that's universally celebrated by archaeologists, I think, is Fallback Day, especially if you're working today.
Well, you need to get rid of those holidays because go to Arizona Standard Time. Seriously, choose a time and just stay in it. You're not benefiting anything. I mean, I guess so for what, 48 hours you feel awesome? But then, there's going to be some new series. You're going to binge it. You'll go to sleep late, and then you'll wake up, and then it'll be even earlier because... Or when spring comes along, that's the one that's the crippler. Now I have to get used to all this again. I forgot about all that.
Well, and it's been a while since you lived in this, and especially you've never lived that far west in this time zone. I mean, for us here in Reno, tonight it's going to get dark before 5 p.m. tonight. It's going to be dark for at 4:30 for you. I don't know what time sunset is for you.
I know, yeah. Well, the best thing, though, is I can be like, oh, kids. Actually, no, I can't even do this anymore because my son can read those numbers. And my daughter, she's 4, but she can read a clock, right? But, they're going to be able to. No, Dad, that's a 5. That's not 8. Like, son, you're exhausted. Go to bed now. What, at 5:30? Yeah, it's way later than you really think. But now they can read, they can tell numbers, so that's not going to happen. So I get no benefits. Right. I get no benefits now.
That's awesome. All right. Well, we got a bunch of things we want to talk about on this episode. I want to mention real fast, just because this episode is coming out, I think 5 days after the release, and then and I just got it on Friday. But the iPhone X is out, and I'm not going to go into a full review here because I've already done that. I did it on the You Call This Archaeology episode 17, which is only on Facebook and Richie Cruz's Happy Archaeology Fun Time YouTube channel. Actually, that episode probably isn't up yet because we just did it on Friday. But it is on Facebook, the live recording. And in the first part, I actually did kind of a mock unboxing of the iPhone X and talked about it. And I'm not trying to be a dick about it, but or some sort of Apple fanboy. I'll be honest with you. If everybody looks at the phone, and I've seen a few people say, "Oh, but I don't want to pay $1,000 plus for the phone." This phone was $1,250. Okay, but you know how much I paid for it? Absolutely nothing, because I've been on the AT&T Next plan for like 4 years now, and I'm just used to like student loan payments and car payments. We get used to those things. We get used to having those things. Insurance payments, stuff like that. I have a phone payment, and I'm okay with it because it allows me to get these things, test them out, see how they're going to work in the field, report on them on different podcasts so you guys can know what's up. And I enjoy that. I think it's okay. It's my payment is, I think, $35 a month. It was for my iPhone 7 Plus, which I'm sending back to AT&T tomorrow. And it's still $35 a month. And now I've got the new phone, and I can check it out. I can try it out. And there's actually some really good benefits for CRM archaeologists coming into the winter months with this new phone, especially the Face ID and stuff. It's actually really good for people wearing gloves all the time. So that's my thoughts on it. I'm not going to go into a full review on this, but Bill, what do you think about phone payments? Is that what you're disagreeing about?
Much of it. I'm disagreeing with much of it. It's not I mean, I don't know what to say. I guess maybe I have to be Doug on this one. But no. I'm the kind of guy who gets the last version of the phone when everybody else like you gets the new one, because I'll get it for like $300 less, and it does basically the same things that everything else, because they have to make sure that everything is retrofitted, right? Because they can't just get rid of every single program and app just because they have a new phone. So they try to keep them alive for 2 or 3 years. So I'm the one who gets that one. It's much cheaper. However, I would have to say, though, the payments thing creates more of an incentive for you to get a new phone, because my wife and I were on Verizon, and we finished paying off our phones, the old, I guess you probably would be laughing, but the old iPhone 5s, right? Our old iPhone 5Ss. We finished paying them off, and then we noticed a curious thing on our bill. Basically, our payments didn't go down at all because they had a subsidy for our new phone that was almost the price of the payment that we were paying anyway. So when we paid off our phone, they just took away the subsidy. So basically, our phone bill didn't go down any. Right.
So that's how they do
I guess in this world where there's brand new phones and stuff, if you can never emancipate yourself, like in the old days, I used to get the $99 phone, right? They'd come out with a new one, and then I'd get the one that was $99. Well, they got rid of that, and they made us all finance our phones. So I started financing my phone, still getting the previous edition, right? Well, if they're going to get rid of that benefit, the financial benefit, and you're always on the hook for payments, if you live in that world, then you pretty much have incentive to get a new phone, as long as it's not going to increase your payments too much. So if that's an iPhone X, sweet. XI, 9, 10, whatever, if you like the iPhone, go ahead and get it. And I also would have to say, this last time I switched to a Samsung Galaxy 8, and it's not as good. It's not as good as an iPhone.
Well, you're also not used to it. I mean, if you're going to switch to anything from an iPhone, the Samsung Galaxy 8 is the phone to switch to. I mean, from a hardware standpoint, the whole Galaxy line is a really great line of phones, right? I mean, it does a lot of cool things. But I want to take the conversation away from doing cool things and having the latest technology, because I think that's what people focus on, especially people in archaeology, because most people are all kind of, hippies and blah, 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 and doing these things. But I want to look at it a little more objectively, because, this phone, now the iPhone X is the size of the iPhone 6, okay? It's the same size as the iPhone 6. The only difference is there's no bezel whatsoever. The screen goes edge to edge. So the screen is actually bigger than my wife's 8 Plus and then my 7 Plus, because it was the same screen. The screen's a little bigger, but the phone itself is the size of the 6. So I appreciate technology and the fact that it's going down in size, because it was getting a little ridiculous how big they were, right? I mean, I could fit this phone on top of your Samsung 8, and I'll have more screen real estate, and yet I'll have a smaller phone, right? And I appreciate that from just a sticking it in my vest pocket standpoint. And, we have to put these robust cases on our phones, which just makes these big phones even bigger, right? So
yeah, I agree.
But then again, really looking at this, I mean, let's talk about your average. I mean, you and I, Bill, are pretty well settled, so we're not doing a lot of traveling anymore for work. And if you look at people that are, though, I mean, simply calling it a phone is kind of detracting from the fact that it's it's capable of so much more. And I think people just don't realize the full potential of their devices. I mean, I do so many things on this. This phone is 256 gigabyte hard drive for one thing. My computer, my brand new MacBook Pro, has a 256 gigabyte hard drive, the same as my phone. And my phone processor has twice the computing power as my 2011 MacBook Pro. Okay. Now, I do so many things on that phone, and yet still we have this stigma of when I'm looking down and my thumbs are blazing and I'm doing stuff, people are like, oh, he's just playing on his phone. No, I'm doing work, you asshole. And, I'm actually doing things. And from a CRM archaeologist standpoint, it means I can stop at a rest stop when I'm driving to my next job, and I've got a computer in my pocket, and I can come out and do full business. I can do email. I can do anything I want. Email's a bad example, but I can do all kinds of different things, utilizing apps and all that stuff, not just checking Facebook, not just leaving the latest Snapchat, and do anything like that. You can do so much more, except we don't realize the full potential, and therefore we say, oh, I don't need the newest thing because I just make phone calls and do text messages. Okay, Grandma, welcome to 1995.
I'll actually, while I'm, it's not just that I'm not used to the new Samsung, the Galaxy 8. It's just not as good. I mean, the rotation stuff is not as good. The screen change in light, I don't know what the name of that is, but how it adapts to straight sunlight and stuff, that's not as good.
Oh, right.
So the processing power is great and everything. And also what's amazing is for, I think $35 on sale at Best Buy, I was able to add another 65 gigabytes of RAM to the phone, or memory, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, I was able to increase the memory greatly for not very much money compared to the Apple, where you pay thousands of dollars more to get 20 or 30 more gigs. But the one thing I would have to say, and I haven't actually tried this yet, because we should talk sometime about the Galaxy Tab, the A3 versus iPad Pro 9.7. I definitely am much more happy with my Samsung tablet than my Apple phone. Basically, the iPad's transformed into what the kids watch cartoons on, and I actually work and use the Galaxy tablet as an actual laptop. Yeah. But they do have with the Galaxy this new dock, the Dex dock, and you should watch the video for it, because essentially you just plug your phone into the dock, and then you just start running Windows applications right from your phone. So you're using you can use PowerPoint, Word, all that stuff. You're just using it straight into your phone. And for the longest time, I have waited for the day when my phone replaces my laptop. And I just show up to work and I put my phone down on its, charger, and I just start working straight from my phone, because I walk around with the phone all the time. It's got all my files and stuff, and as long as I have connection, I have access to all kinds of stuff. But I've always been limited by not being able to do the same applications and stuff that I can on my laptop on my phone. Well, finally, it looks like these Galaxy, in the next 5 years or so, we actually will have that, where our docking station just basically is, a medium grade laptop, and you no longer need a tablet. You no longer need, maybe the tablet for the size, but you won't need a laptop. I hope that happens. It'd be great.
I think we're super close to that. I think we could do that now, and I think there was actually a Google Chromebook line for a while. I don't know if it's still around, that actually did just that. Your processing power and your internet connection, everything actually came from your phone, and it looked like a normal laptop, and everything was processing from your phone, though. I think. Don't quote me on that. It might not have been Google Chrome, and it might have been something else, but the only thing I think that's keeping us from doing that, honestly, is the attitude. It's still the attitude towards phones, and this goes beyond archaeology. I'm having discussions on Facebook with other people that I know aren't in archaeology, and they're like, "There's always the conversation. Anytime Apple comes out with something new, there's always the haters that are like, oh, where's all the fanboys standing in line and blah blah blah. My iPhone 3G is still rocking my world, and because all I do is talk to grandma and send text messages to my kids." So. But it's that attitude that's actually making the progress slower. We will get to that point, and I'm not saying to increase the likelihood of doing that, we need to all go out and buy Apple products. Although in reality, that would help. I mean, quite frankly, that's how capitalism and business works. You give them more money to do things, and they'll come out with more things for you to buy. So, I mean, unfortunately, that's the truth. But
well, also the other thing that's preventing us is developers are developing for the mini screen, and they're developing for the other one, and they're not adding in the responsiveness that you need. So we make a website on WordSpace. It's responsive to whatever screen you're on, but so far stuff is just straight up, OS mobile or Android, and it's not actually Windows or iOS because they haven't just added the extra code to make sure that it's responsive, really. Because you're right, the computing power of the phone is basically the same speed as a Chromebook at least, or an entry-level laptop for sure, I can tell you that. Yeah. And with this new docking station, it looks like they're getting to the point where, you're working on your screen. You can even have dual screens on it. You can use actual Microsoft programs that we all use to make our writing or our slideshows or whatever else, right? So it's got the power. The thing can run the same apps, but we're stuck in a mobile versus desktop, paradigm. That's the real thing that's keeping us from moving to the next level.
Yeah, no, I totally agree, man. It's a mind shift. That's what it is. It's getting people used to thinking about things differently and thinking about how they do computing differently, and everything like that. I mean, places like where you're at, over in Berkeley, that have pretty ubiquitous internet and cell service and all those things. I mean, the simple fact that we even have computer processors, this was Google's whole plan. And, starting in San Francisco, it's no surprise. But when you have people who are constantly connected, their idea is, well, let's take the hard drive away from computers and put everything in the cloud. And once you do that, I mean, computers are mostly hard drives and processing power these days, but once you take the storage and the processing and you actually put that in the cloud, so things are happening on multiple servers across the network and then coming back to you in real time, once data transfer is no longer an issue and speed of data is no longer an issue, then none of that becomes an issue. Laptops become obsolete. And tablets become tablets, and then now we start paying for that as well. The hardware is going to drop to nothing, I think. Like an iPhone, they're not going to keep getting more expensive. In 10 years, an iPhone's going to be $5 out of a vending machine because what you're accessing is the network, and that's what's going to cost you money.
Yeah, well, so I mean, also the other thing that's holding us back is the screen, right? It's fine to have stuff in a small screen for your phone. But, I mean, when it's time to do actual work, almost everybody uses at least one actual screen. And so that's the thing. So, the keyboard is pretty affordable. The screen is pretty expensive, mainly because it's attached to the processor and all that other stuff. But if we get to the point where, the phone is $2,000 and the huge badass screen is, $200 and your keyboard's $30, you just go to your desk and sit there. And you've already got a TV at your house that you're either neglecting by only watching Netflix. It can do so much more stuff than you actually can ever access, right? You'd have to have all these subscriptions and all this stuff, cable and everything to get your TV to fully do what it really can actually do. I mean, if you move it to the point where, you just sit there on your, grab a keyboard, you're sitting there with a Bluetooth keyboard on your lap and you're working right there at your house on a TV screen. And somebody else needs to work, they just grab their screen, either a tablet or something else. I mean, that's where we really need to be. A bunch of portable keyboards, because we're used to using that. The touchscreen, I have a touchscreen enabled Lenovo Yoga that I use the touchscreen a lot, more than I ever thought I would. Yeah. So, I mean, we're moving closer, but it's that step of, like you were saying, you pay for the cloud, you pay for the phone, and then everything else is just kind of like ancillary. You no longer need a laptop. You don't need any of this other stuff unless you're doing high-end processing, which you'd need a desktop anyway. You just need the screen, the phone, and a keyboard, something to communicate with.
Yeah, that's true. I'm looking forward to the future and the possibilities that we can come up with, because it's just a matter of time, really, with as quickly as things are changing. And I'll finish out the iPhone or the phone discussion. The way I tell everybody, my piece of advice to everyone, like I had someone I was just talking to on Facebook, and she was like, well, I've got a 6, should I, and I need to upgrade it because it's starting to do some weird things. And that's what she was saying. She's like, should I get the 8 Plus or should I get the 10 or whatever? And I was like, listen, if you're the type of person that only upgrades every 2, 3, or even 4 years, I was like, when you do upgrade, you have to get the best one that's available. Otherwise, the one you buy is going to be a paperweight that much sooner, and it's getting even more critical as they change things. Like the switch to iOS 11 made it so they're no longer backwards compatible. Apps are no longer backwards compatible to 32-bit style apps. Yeah. That's how they were programmed. They all have to be 64. So if you're rocking an app all the time that the developers have either stopped supporting, or it's some kid in his mom's basement and he only updates it every 2 years, it's going to stop working if it's not upgraded to 64-bit capability. That's not hard for them to do, but some of those apps are just simply unsupported now. And that's how it's going to go. So if you don't buy the later thing and you stay up on that technology, your phone will become a brick even that much quicker as we move forward in time.
Yeah, so, and that goes back to the whole laptop thing, right? So, you've got a laptop. I have one or two laptops that are still using Windows 7. They're 5 or 6 years old. I think one of them's probably a 7. I've only had it for 6 years or 5 years, but it's actually already a year or two old when I bought it on sale for $200 and some bucks, right? So that thing is still surviving for a long time. I mean, it's not at peak performance or whatnot, but Netflix, Microsoft Word, all that stuff still works on it. It's still a functional device, right? Mm-hmm. But the phone is going to be a brick. So if you, like I was saying, if you want people to continually pay more for these phones, then they have to really replace some of these other objects that we already have. It takes, 7-8 years for a normal laptop to be a brick, to be totally useless, right? Mm-hmm. Depending on the processing power. If you get a pretty good laptop today, you can be, assured that by 2014, 2025, 2023, you still could be using that thing. I mean, that's real. Your phone, it's not going to last 2 years. They make it so the thing breaks. So if that's going on, then we need to start thinking twice about these laptops. If you're constantly getting a brand new phone every single year because they're forcing you to, we're going to stop buying laptops because we can't afford a $2,000 Samsung Galaxy 12, or whatever the hell. And it doesn't look like your idea that the phones are going to be cheaper. I don't think so. I think that they're advertising the hell out of the phones, and it's the laptops that are going to be cheaper because the laptops are becoming more and more obsolete. So, I mean, that we need to get to the screen plus keyboard, two durable pieces of hardware that last decades. They can last a long, long time versus the phone that they're forcing you to get all the time. And like, a laptop, if they come out with a new one, no matter how awesome the advertising is, you're not forced to do anything. But the phone literally won't work. I mean, your apps won't work. You can't call grandma. They'll sandbag the whole thing. So you must get a new one. And I mean, it's just hard for me to come up off of $1,000. It's going to be hard for me to come off with $2,000 when I just dropped, $700 on a laptop, another $700 on a tablet, and then I just bought an $800 phone that I'm financing. I mean, that's a tough world to live in.
I hear you, man. It is tough, but all right. Well, we're going to move on from this since we're already over time anyway. So let's kill this segment, and we're going to come back and talk about something completely different here in just a second.
This network is supported by our listeners. You can become a supporting member by going to arcpodnet.com/members and signing up. As a supporting member, you have access to high-quality downloads of each show and a discount at our future online store, and access to show hosts on a members-only Slack team. For professional members, we'll have training shows and other special content offered throughout the year. Once again, go to arcpodnet.com/members to support the network and get some great extras and swag in the process. That's arcpodnet.com/members.
All right, we are back, and this is episode 123 of the CRM podcast, and we unintentionally went 23 minutes talking about the iPhone and technology in general. This is not the Archaeotech podcast. But it's a long topic. It's fun to talk about, honestly, to see where things are going. But we're going to move on from that. But first, I want to mention real fast, I'm still looking for adding to the pool of co-hosts that we have. We're not looking to replace any co-hosts. We're just looking to add to the pool of co-hosts for the CRM Archaeology podcast because as of right now, Doug is in a challenging situation. He may or may not be coming into the show. Sonia's doing field work, and Steven, I think, is doing field work as well, which happens. That's why I have a number of people. So we're looking for a few more people to come in, to bring in some fresh ideas, to bring in some fresh perspectives, and to add to the pool of hosts that we can pull from so we can get these shows and keep them rolling. And I think just the nature of CRM Archaeology, it's nice to have different opinions and different things like that. Plus, Bill, I don't think we can hear any more of your monologues. I think you're all talked out. So, especially now that you're a professor and it's all you do is talk all day.
I was going to say, that's how I roll now.
That's how you roll now.
You just talk.
I don't want to burn you out. That's all I'm saying.
No, I can talk about myself or other things that I'm interested in all day.
There you go. All right, so we have to talk about this. We've talked about this next topic before on the podcast, just occasionally, but with the whole #MeToo phenomenon going on social media right now, I feel like we have to address this, and I really wish we had a more diverse range of genders on the show right now to really have a conversation about this. It feels kind of wrong just having a bunch of guys talk about this. However, this isn't just a women issue. I mean, it is a men and women issue. Harassment happens in both directions. Obviously, the most primary direction it happens in is men towards women, and that's how it's often perceived. And I think that's what we want to talk about. Bill, you brought this article to me, kind of talking about the whole Harvey Weinstein thing, which kind of kicked it off and got it rolling. And now there's allegations against against 45, which is not really too surprising. And there's allegations coming out about different people. I mean, hell, even allegations against Kevin Spacey, and they've halted production on House of Cards. So. Yeah. This is, things are coming out of the woodwork as more people speak up, which is, I think, what's good about these campaigns is as more people speak up, others are encouraged to speak up. But let's talk about this from a field perspective. So why did you want to bring this to the podcast? What are your thoughts on this initially?
Well, first of all, I wanted to bring it to, we have talked about this before, and I've blogged about it before. And as archaeologists, if you've been paying any attention over the last few years, there's been several kind of high-profile harassment things that have gone down that have implications for archaeologists. The thing that I'm thinking of most recently is the survey from 2014 that they did of field anthropologists, and noting that the number of women who had experienced harassment in the field was pretty high. I'm looking right now. The people who published in POLS1, I don't have the authors, L. Clancy et al. Yeah, they did a survey of anthropologists and noted that it was extremely high. So for archaeologists, we've been aware, or you should have been aware unless you were living under a bridge, that this is going on in our industry. But I recently came across a short podcast on the game plan on Bloomberg News, which I don't really listen to Bloomberg News, but the thing that caught me was that a classical archaeologist at the University of Arizona, Beth Alpert Nakai, is doing a survey and research for the American Association, or it's the AIA. I can't remember which one it is, but they're trying to. Which one is it?
That's the Archaeological Institute of America.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
So they're trying to figure out some kind of system that can make women feel more safe in the field, because as she's finding in archaeology, specifically academic archaeology, this is a pretty widespread thing. And so, I guess this strikes at a whole bunch of different levels, not only just our own naivete as men, that this is so rampant and such a salient thing, and that over the last 4 years, study after study keeps showing that this kind of stuff happens. But then every time something comes out, at least me, I'm, kind of amazed at the widespread existence of this. I spend, as a guy, I'm in my own bubble of my own thoughts, and I don't really recognize all the times that I'm doing things wrong. But what I'm realizing is that there's, serial predators like Weinstein that are doing their stuff, and it's, above and beyond, way worse than what I'd say 90% of men, or maybe even 99% of men. And so these serial, people who do this kind of stuff, they're doing the most egregious forms, right? But there's, other things going on, especially when it comes to archaeology, that either, I don't know if they enable or facilitate they just make it more conducive to this kind of stuff. And one thing that I'd like to bring up is the whole field party type mentality that ends up happening so often. And we've talked about this before too. You leave home, you're staying in a hotel, and you're in some random place, and it seems like some people just kind of lose their whole bearing. Like they just, I guess now we're on crazy vacation, and we're out in the field, and so it's time to drink an astronomical amount more than normal, and to be as outrageous, and also I guess in this place they feel like maybe the rules don't apply. And this is what Dr. Nakai was saying in the interview too, that people get out in these remote locations. Most of her work, I believe, is in the Middle East. I want to say Israel, but so she's doing work out there, and I guess what she found is that a lot of archaeologists feel like because they're not in the United States, or they're not in their normal university situation, that behavior that's otherwise not acceptable is okay, right? So in some ways that makes it seem like maybe the field enables this. And actually I have seen many times, absurd behavior really that people wouldn't be doing if they weren't out in the fields, either staying in tents or living in a hotel or doing something else. And I guess now I'm being more and more aware that a lot of that involves harassment.
I've thought a lot about this actually, and and had a few conversations about it. And it's, for one thing, working, especially as a woman, working in some other countries, especially countries like Israel and things like that, where there's a different relationship between men and women and how things go culturally. That's something that has to be taken into account. But on our projects, like you said, Bill, it's just I think that's one of the biggest detriments to CRM archaeology is the mindset of when you're in the field. Because you're right, so many of our problems are related to people living in a hotel room, being in a hotel room, because we're always used to, hey, I'm in a hotel room when you're younger or you're not in archaeology. I'm in a hotel room, which means I'm on vacation, which means I'm having fun and doing different things. And people seem to get that sort of mentality, especially younger people in the field when they first start. They're not used to living sort of a temporary lifestyle, and they don't treat it like it's a real job. And they're partying and they're doing things because it's temporary. Yeah. It's temporary, and you're in a hotel. So they're wild and they're wacky, and they think, I'm going to act like an ass out at this party. I'm going to hit on these women because I'm just horny, and I don't care.
We've talked about it before. The field party, well, not just field party, but just the prevalence of drinking among archaeologists. That it's my wife has told me before she's amazed at how much we drink when we all get together, and that drinking is just incorporated into so many of the archaeology things in a way that's not the way things are for Africana studies, or for the School of Business, or my wife works in HR. They do not have the same kind of drinking culture that archaeologists do. So if you're new in the field and you're new in this place, and everything you've ever been, hotel is family vacation, spring break, touring, staying at grandma's for Thanksgiving or something like that. Hotel is basically not normal, and every time hotel happens is kind of you're relaxing. None of the rules of normal school or work apply because you're in a hotel. Then add alcohol onto that, and the fact that you're remote. I mean, it's a miracle that anything really gets done.
It's because we're all living in Never Never Land. That's what it is. We never grow up. It's those industries you mentioned. Your wife, where she works, the industry she works in. When she was in college, or when anybody in any industry is in college, I mean, people in general are going to drink in college. They're going to go to parties. They're going to do things that, I'm out of high school. I'm out of my parents, wherever. Now I'm in college. I'm on my own. I'm going to go crazy, but it's only college. And then I'm going to grow up and have a family and be a normal person, right? The problem is when archaeologists get out of college, that doesn't stop. That just keeps going. Yeah, you go from college to a hotel room, to a hotel room, to a hotel room, and it's a constant party atmosphere. It's a constant party attitude, and that lifestyle of being in college just never goes away. Now, what happens when you settle down and you're now a PI and you've come up in the world, and you're now hanging out with a different set of people? You're not constantly in the hotel room. Do you still have that sort of drinking culture? Probably not. You know, maybe when you go to a conference and you hook up with your old buddies.
Yeah, what ends up, well, I don't know about that because I'm still young. I guess maybe I'm still in Never Never Land, right? But
I think we all are.
what I think happens is that you just kind of live through the young people, right? So late at night when you're at the conference or whatever, most of the older people, the emeriti, have long since gone, but they, ask questions and they want to know what's going on and everything. And that whole, oh, you had too many drinks last night? Oh, I remember that.
Mm-hmm.
It encourages you. So this person who's made it to this high level also did that when they were your age. So that's normalizing it and also kind of, keeping it going. But I don't know. I don't know about harassment if that's also normalized. Because I don't think that if, you're an emeriti and then you say, oh, yeah, last night I was absolutely harassing this individual and saying obnoxious things and doing all that stuff. I'm pretty sure they would be like, yeah, that's not okay. Mm-hmm. But I don't know, though, because I'm a man. That's the other thing. Because I'm a man, I come at it from a different perspective. I hear things differently than women. This stuff doesn't really happen to me. I can, because I'm not white, maybe relate in some ways. However, I'm not a woman. So I don't know how it feels or how pervasive it is. I can hear stories coming from women if they're willing to share those, but then there's some knowledge that I'm just not allowed to know because I'm a guy.
Yeah. Well, let's ask a little more philosophical question too, because we've had these types of conversation before, and we've all said it as well. Like you just said, like, I'm a man, I don't have the perspective of harassment that a woman has. And I've heard guys say before, hell, I've probably said it before, I don't have that perspective because, quote, I've never been harassed, right? Like, we'll say that because I'm a man. I've never been harassed in that way, in a sexual way. But the question is, do we just look at it differently as well? Which obviously I think the answer to that question is yes. Yeah. Women, guys, if you and I are talking to each other, we might say some really horrific things to each other that if this were a conversation between, let's say, a man and a woman, one of those parties would feel very harassed by that conversation, but you and I are just like having this conversation and it's nothing. It's how we talk to each other, and women, when they get together, probably talk to each other very differently than when men are around, but it's just when a woman talks to a man that way, I guess we don't feel harassed. We feel encouraged.
Yeah. But so then,
which is
that's
bad.
What I was going to say. That's what Me Too needs to fix.
I know.
Then that if we've normalized that and that's our life, then that's where we need to start with ourselves. Maybe that needs to be cut out. I mean, we got to stop doing that kind of stuff because we're not 13-year-old boys anymore.
Yeah.
And because there's just really no space for that in adulthood. There's probably no space for that as a young person either.
No.
I mean, I teach my kids not to be discriminatory against people because of, ability or race or anything. So it's probably not okay for my son to hear me say that kind of stuff. And so that's where I think that the Me Too, by seeing it on social media that every single woman I know has been harassed. And I mean, I've got sisters and I've got a daughter, I'm a husband, I've got a mother. And for everyone I know to say that, it's kind of like, geez, man, all of us have been doing this kind of stuff. So I guess maybe being part of a man needs to change because that cannot be happening anymore. If everyone you know has been harassed, that's where we got to start.
Yeah. Well, we are going to pick this conversation up on the other side of the break. We're going to take our break a little bit early because we had a longer segment last time and I want to stay on time. In the meantime, I'm trying to say this on most of the podcasts. Go to arcpodnet.com/members to see how you can support the podcast and get some extras and go buy some stickers because they're really cool. Well, and I've got them on all my stuff.
And also tell us what we're missing about this. Give us advice.
Yes.
Please comment. I mean, this is not just us speaking into a microphone, even though it kind of is.
No.
I hope other people out there hear this and can set us straight and can give us insight or information.
Yeah, another thing you get at the members site is access to a private Slack team for members only, and you can have conversations with us about these episodes to keep the conversation going, where you wouldn't have that access in sort of a private, closed format, not like on Facebook where everybody can see it. You're just talking to us and other fans of the show. So, all right, we're going to take a break, and we'll be back in just a second.
Interested in archaeology? Want to hear from experts in the field about the latest discoveries and interpretations? Check out the Archaeology Show every other Saturday and let hosts Chris Webster and April Camp Whitaker take you deeper into the story. Check out the Archaeology Show at www.archpodnet.com/archaeology and subscribe, rate, and comment on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, and the Google Music Store. That's www.archpodnet.com/archaeology. Now back to the show.
Okay, we're back, and we are talking about. We're kind of finishing up a discussion on the Me Too campaign. I don't know if campaign is the right word. The Me Too issue going around social media, and then we're gonna bring the topic around again to something completely different. So, Bill, I just had one final thought personally on the whole attitude, like you were just mentioning at the end of the last segment about how we need to change our culture as guys and how we talk to each other. I mean, I know this isn't the be-all, end-all solution to this, but I think just some maturity and some education and some, just how we run our lives. I've noticed as I've gotten older that the way that I talk to people and the way that I interact with people obviously changes. Now, that's not to say that, it's only uneducated people that are harassing women. Obviously, Harvey Weinstein is a very rich man, and he harassed plenty of women. Donald Trump is probably one of the richest men in the world, and he's harassed plenty of women. It's just positions of power cause men to do that as well. And I would imagine positions of power for women also cause them to do it. It's just, it's perceived differently on the other side. Power corrupts. It doesn't matter what gender you are. But I think that just having a different class of conversations amongst your coworkers, hey, let's not talk about make racist jokes and do all these things because people do it all the time. Let's not do those things and let's talk about stuff that really matters. And we can still have fun, but I don't know. Let's just upgrade our conversations. You know what I mean? So.
No, you're exactly right. Well, I mean, that's what happens to a lot of us. That's just kind of what happens, right? So, as a young teen, there's a lot of peer pressure and stuff like that for you to conform and to do all kinds of things that you wouldn't normally do. And then as you get to be an adult, you're supposed to shed those ways, right? But I guess if we all live in fantasy land and stay archaeologists, then binge drinking and saying obnoxious stuff and just treating it like it's field party. I mean, someday you just got to stop doing that kind of stuff. I don't know. I don't know where that day ends, right? Because obviously I guess I'm still in it.
Well, you're kind of in it. I mean, now that you're at Berkeley, if you're just sitting around the office there and talking to people, I'm willing to bet your conversations are very different than they were 5 years ago in the field.
The cursing is way lower. I think the podcast actually helps me cut down on cursing and having children.
Nice. Yeah, that'll do it. That's good. All right, so there's another topic we're going to talk about here, and I'm just going to let you kick this off, Bill, because you brought this topic to our ears, and we've again, this is something we have talked about before, and I have some further thoughts on this as well. But let's talk about PhDs.
Yeah, and this is something that I hope anyone listening to me out here takes with a grain of salt as trying to not destroy your dreams, right? I mean, I'll destroy them in many other ways, but not by telling you the truth. So I
That's right.
in my news feed, I get stuff on archaeology, and this week in the International Weekly Journal of Science, I guess it was last week, there's an article that says many junior scientists need to take a hard look at their job prospects, right? So I started to look at it thinking, sweet, just more of what I already actually in fact know. But one of the things that came up when I was reading the article is that I guess a lot of PhD students do not know that they're probably not going to become academicians. They're not going to work in academics. And I think a lot of PhDs understand that they're not all going to become tenure track professors. But in my and I think, in my experience of working with other people who were PhD students, it was fully understood that, you're probably not going to become a tenure track professor. Just the competition's really high, really hard, but that maybe somehow you would become an affiliated researcher, or that you'd be an archaeologist for some academic organization, or that in some way you would still be part of the PhD. Essentially, your PhD would continue in the college realm, right? So, I guess Arizona maybe does a better job because they're doing so much work with communities and they do so much collaboration with cultural resources. I think maybe a lot of the people that were in my graduate cohort understood that CRM was a thing and that, Arizona did it well, and that there were people in the industry that were going to just keep doing archaeology, but they wouldn't actually work for a university. So that CRM was a thing, and that it was not this, failure that you had, oh gosh, you work for CRM, wow, you're part of the enemy or something like that. CRM companies come and give lectures at the University of Arizona all the time. They help be guest speakers in class. They give presentations. They share their time. And that's one of the reasons why you don't really see a lot of job postings for Arizona jobs in archaeology, because they know the students at Arizona State or the University of Arizona, and they're going to hire those students that they actually know, that they've already worked with, that, you have some kind of integration, right? And I'm new at Berkeley, so I don't really know if that's going on there. And I guess I'm really bad. I've been here for months now, and I haven't even really met all the archaeology graduate students. And I've never had this conversation with most of them, but with a lot of undergrads, I have talked about the fact that CRM exists and that, you should be really designing your education to get into that, because that's where you have the highest chance of getting a job.
Right.
So to see this article, it says many PhD students have never even talked, like 3/4 of them, they were saying, of the people surveyed had never even talked to their advisor about working outside of academia. I don't really know what to say. I'm not other professors, so I don't know what they're telling their students, and I don't have any PhD students myself yet. But, it just only makes sense that you'd be preparing to do cultural resources while you're in your PhD, because that's the most likely way for you to feed yourself doing archaeology.
Before we get too deep into basically degree inflation and things like that, and putting PhDs in the field as field techs, I worked with one this summer who was not a field tech. He was running the project, but still, a PhD in the field, running a project. And before we get into that, I want your take as somebody who's gone through this entire process. You were in the field for a long time. You've done every facet of CRM, and you've worked in different areas, and now you have your PhD, and now you actually are a professor. So what do you think? Let's take away the thought that a PhD is required in some way to work in the field of CRM, right? It's not right now, but with degree inflation, it may be in the future. Let's take that away from the conversation and tell me what you think the advantages, and take away finances as well. What are the advantages of getting a PhD to your career? Why would somebody get a PhD if it's not required for their job? Again, take that out. But what are the advantages to getting a PhD? What do you get from it?
So if you eliminate all that other stuff, the only advantage is personal gratification. The reality is, if you go through a PhD or even a master's, but I would definitely say at the PhD level, you are used to working hard at intellectual stuff and grinding it out. So whether you actually go the full Monty and become a tenure track professor, or whether you go into CRM, in order to make it out of that PhD and to actually in fact have that thing, you have grinded it out in an archive or with a collection or through a never-ending level of bureaucracy to finally finish on the other side. So you have, someone who has an undergrad, and I'm not trying to say that undergrad's a lesser degree or anything like that. It's just a different degree. If you went, I started my PhD when I was 32, I think, or maybe 33. Okay, so if I was 33 years old and I started an undergraduate degree, it would have probably taken me about as long as a PhD. However, I would have spent the first 2 years doing very basic stuff that's just getting me used to going to college, because undergrads start at varying levels of motivation or experience or whatever. So the first 2 years are just getting you used to being a college student. And then the second 2 years just briefly introduce you to kind of research and independent thinking, really. You're just getting into that, right? And so for someone who's never gone to college before, that's huge, right? Mm-hmm. If you have gone to college before and you take a PhD, you're in independent thought immediately. And based on how hard your program is, you could be into the point where you're, working into a nervous breakdown, essentially. And I mean that not in a good way. Just the intensity and the amount of effort that you're putting into this thing is, it breaks a lot of people. So someone who finishes that thing is like a samurai compared to someone who finished an undergrad. And I mean, I don't mean that, I don't want to make it seem like someone who's finished an undergrad has not done something major. They have. This is something that we all need in the world. But it's like an undergrad on advanced level of steroids to the point where you could die from it.
Yeah, I mean, we can easily bring like sports into this metaphor, because if if you were amazing on X sports team, whatever it was in high school, that's an achievement. That takes a lot of work. But most people, a huge percentage of the population goes on to college, does not play that sport, learns something new, and goes on about their lives. But some of them will go into college and play that sport on top of a class workload, and then still excel at it, and then go on to be a professional or an Olympian or something like that.
I'd say that the being a professor is the pros in the Olympics. That's where your life does in fact get destroyed. You're talking like college level, right? So if you played in junior high and high school, then you got to play for a university team, right? And you can imagine if you played football for Alabama, you're one of the best recruits in the United States. If you played for Alabama State, it's not that you're a lesser recruit, just you didn't have what it takes to be on Alabama, right? And so that's the same thing with finishing a master's or a PhD. You've done it pretty well. The people that are faculty, though, they're, the major players, Tom Brady level, right? It's gross.
Yeah,
I'm not saying I'm anywhere near Brady. I wouldn't even say that I'm like Brady's like fourth stream backup, but I'm saying the people who are teaching at these, major universities, Oxford and Berkeley and stuff, they put that kind of stuff to shame. Like, it's crazy to see these folks.
Yeah, I mean, it does say something, Bill, that your first job as a professor ever out of getting your PhD is at Berkeley. I mean, that does say something about who you are and who they think you are, I think. I mean, it puts a lot of pressure on you as well.
There's a reason why I woke up at 3:45, and it wasn't just because my alarm clock didn't go off.
Right. But no, that's a big thing, and that's what we're saying about you finish your undergrad. That's a big accomplishment, and this is how I think of it. So you mentioned the first thing you said when I said what's your big payoff from a PhD if we take away some sort of salary that you might think you're going to get or anything else, and you said personal gratification, and I think while that is a huge thing, if I look at it from a business owner standpoint, and I'm looking at different people in the field that have done different things. When I go to hire somebody that has a graduate degree, typically a master's degree in this field, but increasingly PhDs, when I go to hire somebody with a graduate degree, one of the things that I'm going to immediately assume about that person, even if I knew nothing about their resume, is that they may have a different work ethic. They may have, it's not guaranteed, but they may have a different work ethic than somebody who didn't have a graduate degree. And I'm only saying that because this person decided to go into a new thing, go stick out that new thing and work really hard at it and then complete it and finish it. And those are all things that very few people do.
Yeah.
Okay. That's not to say somebody without a graduate degree is incapable of doing that, but that's just something I know. I know that somebody has already done that, right? They're already proven themselves that they can do that kind of thing. And that's what that says to me. A graduate degree doesn't instantly make you smarter. A graduate degree doesn't instantly make you more capable than somebody else. I mean, it might if you learn some different things, but it doesn't make you, let's say, a better person in the ways that people typically say. But it does say some things about who you are. It does say some things about your work ethic. It has to. Yeah. Otherwise, what's the point?
So my response, that's true of someone who gets a graduate degree, but we're talking about PhDs here, right? So
that's a whole
many other people hit the glass ceiling with their undergrad, especially in archaeology, and they can't go further unless they meet the Secretary of Interior standards. And however which way you interpret that, a graduate degree is part of it, right? So there's tons of people who go back to get their master's because they can't make it any further in CRM. Then there's the psychos like me that go to the PhD level, right? So why would you ever do that to yourself? I mean, I don't know. Why would you ever do CrossFit? Why would you ever compete in CrossFit? Why would you ever try your hardest to become an NFL star? Because you are either a glutton for punishment or you want to have that gratification, really. And that's kind of what the whole PhD is all about. So you're right. If you take someone with that extra intellectual ability and that ability to just endure stuff as far as research, and stick it out to fruition, And then you don't tell them that they can use all those skills in CRM, and instead you make them feel shamed that they didn't get a job at Berkeley. I mean, come on. These are some of the highest achievers. We need these folks. I can't speak to the PhD you worked for, that was running the project, but I've come across both halves. People who are hardcore and they're PhDs, and they're great in the field and they're awesome in CRM, and they do a lot, and they push you further, and they know a lot, right? They're smart to begin with, and then they have that extra ability. So, they're awesome. Then there's many others like that I've seen that they're lost, and they were never prepared in any way to be out there, and they don't know what to do, and they feel kind of ashamed and saddened that they're doing CRM because they feel like somehow they failed, that they didn't get this job in academia, when it's not their fault at all. I mean, the article talks about how we're cranking out way more PhDs than any university or industry can absorb. So if you're going to survive and not go home and live with your parents on the couch, you have to find a job. And if you want to do archaeology, it's going to be CRM. So not that you need to feel ashamed that you didn't go on to a tenure track position or a postdoc or whatever. At a certain point, if you want to keep doing archaeology, you're going to do it in archaeology consulting, because that's where most of us work. And we need people that have that extra level, that aren't going to cut corners and are going to try hard, because that's one thing that I see changing the whole industry. If all these people have graduate degrees, they're used to doing research, and they're not willing to just accept it. They're not willing to just accept a paycheck and clients to tell them to turn corners and stuff. And they don't have an MBA. They're used to research. So all the clients want them to just cut corners. There will be space for them. But hypothetically, we would see a higher level of production. And I mean, working in Arizona, I can tell you, a place where there's a lot of PhDs and everyone has a master's, the results of what comes out in the report and intellectually is at a higher level. Yeah. It just is.
Yeah, I think the 3-degree system of bachelor's, graduate degree, and then PhD, I think that actually fits really well with CRM archaeology in general, because if you look at percentages, most people are going to have a bachelor's degree, a smaller percent will have a master's degree, and an even smaller percent will have a PhD. Well, you look at your typical company, most of the employees are field technicians, and then you've got a handful of project managers, and then you've got one, if not maybe a couple, PIs that are doing the high level stuff, and that kind of makes sense to me, and that kind of works out. That if we were to make all these things, like if all of our field techs in the field, like everybody in the field was a PhD, that just wouldn't make any sense. That wouldn't work. That is degree inflation. That is a bad thing that we need to avoid.
I don't know. It seems like that. However, inadvertently, we're working ourselves into a situation where there's a diamond structure where some of the people have bachelors, many of the people have a master's, an increasing number of people have a PhD, right? So actually, we're getting to the point where the smallest number of people have the bachelor's degree, at least as far as the archaeologists, because everybody who starts as a tech realizes they're not going to get hired with so many people having master's. They do the best that they possibly can, and then they go back and get a master's so that they can just survive. I mean, I've been on many teams before where there was PhDs out there, masters, and then a couple of people who had a bachelor's, right? And this was like before the recession, where many of the people had a graduate degree, and almost all the supervisors had a PhD.
Right, but is this attitude towards field techs thinking they're not going to get hired unless they go and get another degree, a graduate degree or a PhD? I think that's just simply a problem of education, and it's a problem of education in our field, of educating people about their own field. People. This is one thing I try to hammer in on all the podcasts I ever talk about this on, mostly this one, is this is not a regular job. You're not going to get a 9 to 5 just because you went and got a graduate degree, especially if everyone goes and gets graduate degrees. Now, true, you might have a little more stability if that's what you're looking for if you do get a graduate degree, but you're going to have a different job entirely. So I just think that people think, and you almost just alluded to it, people think that their lives are going to improve, their whole situation is going to improve universally if they get a next level degree, whatever that next level is for them. But the reality is you need to look at where your own career path is. You need to look at where you want to go. If you're working in the Great Basin right now, for an example, and your career path is, I want to be a PI at a company, you don't need an advanced degree for that. You need experience here in the Great Basin. They don't require you, the BLM does not require you to have a graduate degree to be permitted as a PI. I know PIs that have bachelor's degrees that are working for companies right now, and that's what they're doing. They're writing reports, they're writing proposals, they're doing all the things that PI hit. They have no glass ceiling, and they're right there. They don't need a PhD.
But we're not the ones who are stopping. So first, I agree with you. Experience over degrees, every day. But we're not the ones who are. We're not the ones who are shaping this, right? I mean, I didn't go back. I went back to school to get a master's because I wanted to work in archaeology, but I didn't go back to school to get a PhD specifically because I wanted to stay in cultural resource management. I did it because I wanted to be a principal investigator in the state of Arizona, and almost all of the PIs in Arizona have a PhD, right? So I wasn't necessarily looking to move or to do something different. I wanted to make sure that I could stay viable in my state. So when you talk about, you don't need one in Nevada, there's degree inflation that's just automatically happening around us. And as those people who have bachelors running projects drop off, for retirement or move on to other things, below them is a whole cadre of individuals with a master's. And then below, beyond them is a whole cadre of individuals that have a PhD. So, I mean, I know what you're saying, but we can't stop the change. And that's kind of just what's happening.
Yeah, that's true. I don't know what the answer is. I think you did it right, which is what I was saying. In your particular state, you needed a PhD to move up. And it's weird that you didn't stay there and keep doing that, but I would have gone to Berkeley too.
Yeah, well, I don't know what to say. I mean, if you have a chance to work at Berkeley, you should do it, whether you fail or succeed. I'm not going to fail, but
you should do it.
Yeah, I mean, you have a chance, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I would take that in a heartbeat. But that's why you did that, and that was my only point, is educating people about their own situations. I went and got a master's degree only because I was working in the Southeast, and a master's degree was an automatic ticket to project management, and that's where I wanted to go. And then I did the same thing you did. I got my master's degree and immediately moved to the Great Basin, where I was a field tech with a master's degree because they didn't care what I had. I didn't have the experience. If I'd stayed over there, I'd be running. I would have been running a company sooner, or I would have at least been a project manager sooner had I stayed in the Southeast, because that is the culture in that work area over there. Is master's degree means project management.
Yeah.
So,
well, all I have to say is, if you're thinking about getting a PhD or whatever, think about going into CRM, because CRM is where most of us work. You have a PhD, do the kind of stuff that's going to get you hired. And don't just automatically think that degree equals elitism, right? Because there's not enough jobs for everyone with all the PhDs that are out there. And companies have a lot of incentive to hire PhDs, especially if you're, if you have experience in CRM, if you are the kind of human that someone can work with, and then also you have a PhD. I mean, this person, if the master's requires dedication to finish, which it does, then you can imagine the PhD requires even more, which it does. So if you're into hiring that kind of person for that kind of task, then, that's just what's going on. Mm-hmm. So PhDs need to start thinking about CRM rather than just thinking that they're a failure because they didn't get the, 0.01% of tenure track jobs that were out there. I mean, there's no way to know how any of us gets hired in these positions.
I know.
There's no way to know.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think we're going to call that right there. We've gone a little long. I want to know your guys' thoughts on this whole topic, and let's try to eliminate the normal things like I'm never going to get a degree and stuff like that. I want to know your actual intellectual thoughts on if you were to structure the field of CRM from a degree standpoint, or even no degree standpoint. What does the training look like? What does that look like? We can't just say, well, you can train a monkey to walk transects in the desert. Well, that's true. It's not where we want to go with this. There is an educational standard that we need to have just so we can be respected in the field. That's how this world works right now. So what is that educational standard? Where should we get that education? Think outside the box on this, and leave your comments wherever you found them. So we will be back next week with some more, or actually in 2 weeks, with some more great topics. And thanks for listening.
That's it for another episode of the CRM Archaeology Podcast. Links to some of the items mentioned on the show are in the show notes for this podcast, which can be found at www.arcpodnet.com/CRMArcPodcast. Please comment and share anywhere you see the show. If you'd like us to answer a question on a future episode, email us. Use the contact form on the website, or just email chris@archaeologypodcastnetwork.com. Support the show and the network at arcpodnet.com/members. Get some swag and extra content while you're there. Send us show suggestions and interview suggestions. We want this to be a resource for field technicians everywhere, and we want to know what you want to know about. Thanks to everyone for joining me this week. Thanks also to the listeners for tuning in, and we'll see you in the field. Goodbye.
Adios.
This show is produced by Chris Webster and Tristan Boyle, and was edited by Chris Webster.
This has been a presentation of the Archaeology Podcast Network. Visit us on the web for show notes and other podcasts at www.arcpodnet.com. Contact us at chris@archaeologypodcastnetwork.com.
Thanks again for listening to this episode and for supporting the Archaeology Podcast Network. If you want these shows to keep going, consider becoming a member for just $7.99 a month. That's cheaper than a venti quad eggnog latte. Go to arcpodnet.com/members for more info.